Laurence Fox has his own channel on YouTube. It's very interesting. I don't subscribe to a lot of Laurence Fox's political opinions, but I think he's a very watchable interviewer, and it's a very relaxed approach, and that is appealing. So content, questionable, methodology, incredibly impressive. And today he was interviewing a fellow called Nick Dixon. If you don't know anything about GB News, you won't probably know very much about Nick Dixon unless you came across him being rejected on Britain's Got Talent. Nick Dixon presents a GB News comedy show called Headliners. He also does The Weekly Skeptic with Toby Young. Toby Young is somebody who, like Nick Dixon, was blackballed from the media for a while because of his opinions. And that really gets to the sort of the area that was being debated today. So Nick and Laurence were looking at the issue of Ofcom and the regulations by Ofcom. Nick very wisely says, well, if you've got this organisation, who is controlling the watchers? Who watches the watchmen? Perfectly reasonable question. And Ofcom is not only now controlling all mainstream British television, it's also threatening to control or to regulate online media as well. I still think that's a very difficult thing to do. Practically, I think it's almost impossible. And I also don't like the idea, in principle, of censorship. As they pointed out in the programme, art suffers because of censorship. But the real question is, what does Ofcom actually do? And at this point, I think Laurence and Nick both ducked the issue. Because Ofcom's job, I think, goes beyond just observing what's being broadcast. It's there as an answer. It's a little bit like the term God for Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov says, who is God? Well, God is the answer you give when you can't think of anything else. So, where did I come from? A God! Well, Ofcom is the answer that government gives when it can't think of anything else. And I've received a number of letters from the Ministry of Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Now, Culture, Media and Sport. It's gone back to its earlier name. And it's still completely inchoate. It's still chaotic. It's still blundering around and doesn't really say very much. So I've got these letters from Julia Lopez, who's a junior minister in the ministry, and she was there during Nadia Doris's time. She was there during Michelle Donnellan, and she's still there during Lucy Fraser's time. So she's a sort of permanent fixture. She's been practically walled into the structure like an anchorite or an anchoress. Is it anchoress or anchorite? I don't know. And fed daily, probably. And Julia Lopez, her answer to me is talk to Ofcom. Well, when I speak to Ofcom, Ofcom says, well, it's not within our remit. We're only interested in what's broadcast. We're not interested in what goes on after the show or before the show. That is supposed to be covered by psychiatry, which is provided by a budget in the show, I suppose. My argument is that if a show is so disastrous that anybody who participates in it needs a psychiatrist, then maybe, A, the show has selected the wrong people to participate, or B, if the show actually makes people distressed to such an extent that they need psychiatric support, then the show is the wrong sort of thing. And I think a lot of reality TV falls into that bracket. And as I was involved in a reality TV show before the Ofcom remit in 2019, Ofcom can quite happily write back to me or talk to me on the phone, as they have done, and said, well, actually, you predate the 2019 regulation anyway, but even if you didn't, we wouldn't be able to do anything. And yet I got yet another letter from Julio Lopez telling me to talk to Ofcom. Ofcom is simply the word that the government uses when it's dealing with the arts and it doesn't know what to say. Talk to Ofcom. We don't want to deal with this. It's another way of distancing and delaying. Eventually, it will come to bite the government in the backside, a little bit like Matt Hancock's emails, texts, WhatsApp messages. There's only a limited amount of time that the government can keep throwing things forward. Eventually somebody's going to pick these things up and say, well, look, here's the evidence, we want some answers. Maybe the present government hopes by that point the opposition will be in power. Maybe that's the idea. But Ofcom in the meantime is acting as a sort of gatekeeper, whether it knows it or not. And I think those of us who are involved in any way with media need to challenge this particular ideology because it is very, very worrying. It means that in the end, nothing can be done and nothing can be challenged because there's nobody to challenge it. Because Ofcom has become the mantra of our generation. Nick Dixon talks about woke being a software update. I think actually Ofcom is the software update. And I'd love to get Laurence and Nick indeed to talk more fully about their concerns about Ofcom, because I suspect their concerns are the same sort of concerns I've got. That we've got a monolithic organisation that is not responsible to anybody and that is invoked as some sort of deity to answer all problems in media. No organisation can answer all problems, not even the government. Well, the government doesn't answer any problems, does it?